In this video, I'm going to talk about when to take profits in this crypto cycle, the key signs to watch for. I'm making this video because someone suggested it, so if you have any video ideas, let me know in the comments. And I'm also making this video because this cycle and last cycle, for example, a lot of people turned 10K into 200K, into 500K, into half a million, right, through this move. But it didn't matter because they weren't able to sell here and they gave back all the money they made back to the market, and maybe they sold over here. So it doesn't matter how much money you make if you aren't able to sell at the right time and sell near the tops. So this is an extremely important video that you understand when to get out of the markets. So let's get into it. So number one, we have the most important point, which is global liquidity drying up. This is when you want to sell. So if you've been watching my channel, you understand how correlated BTC and the rest of the crypto market is with global liquidity. So if we look at this chart, which if I told you guys to buy the dip over here when Bitcoin was below 80K, because I saw that global liquidity was going up, and guess what? The chart played out perfectly. So the same way this pattern worked out, the inverse will also be true. When we see the global liquidity start to cool down and to start coming down is when you want to be selling. So this chart comes from Real Vision, from someone called Raoul Pal. So I don't want to take credit for this chart. That's all him, but he posts the charts regularly, and that's what I'm going to be paying attention for to find out when global liquidity is going down. And something I want to mention also is that you also don't want to be having price targets, right? I want to explain this point because a lot of people have price targets. A lot of people are looking at Bitcoin and they're going to say, I'm going to sell 50% of my position when Bitcoin is at 200K. And, maybe they hold Cardano and they're going to say, I'm going to sell half my position when we hit $2, right? And I want to explain how that's actually a really bad idea. One, because it's very hard to predict price targets for the top of the cycle, and you'll end up selling way too early or way too late. So for example, let's say Cardano goes to, like for Bitcoin, you can kind of predict what it will go to because like by looking at the previous cycles and other things. But for example, like ADA and especially new coins like Sui, you have a very hard time predicting what they're going to reach because Sui hasn't been around that long. So it's very hard to predict the price target. So let's say you're going to sell at $7, you're going to sell most of your position, and the coin goes to $30. Well, you missed out on a ton of money, right? So you don't want to be doing that. But let's say you have a target like $20 and Sui only goes to 16. Then you're not going to sell any of it, and you'll end up round tripping all the money you made, and you're not going to get any profits. So you do not want to be having price targets as an indicator of when to sell. Instead, you want to be looking at the things that I talk about in this video. And global liquidity is the main thing. So we see how closely M2 money supply follows Bitcoin and crypto. And when it contracts, right, when M2 starts to go down, similarly to how it went up here, when it starts to go down, you can expect BTC to follow and to cool down, and then therefore the rest of the crypto market to come down as well. This is probably the number one signal, and it's time to secure gains when you see this thing start coming down. And I want to go into the second point, the next point, which is the phases of the banana zone. So a lot of people don't really understand what's going on. They just think it's all random, but the cycles actually play out very similarly each time. So let's look at this diagram over here, and we can see the previous Bitcoin cycles. Again, I don't want to take credit for this. This comes from Real Vision, right? And we can see the first cycle, second cycle, and third cycle, how there's 3 stages, and how we just finished stage 1, which was the run up we saw when Trump got elected. And now we're in correction phase, as we see every cycle. And then we'll have continuation to phase 2, which should be coming very soon. And then we have another correction, and then we have stage 3. So currently we're stage 1, so it doesn't make sense to take any profits here. Potentially, if you got in here, maybe you could take some profits, but you don't want to be really taking any profits until at least phase two. So personally, this is just my opinion, as always, but I am gonna probably sell a bit of my position when phase two hits, right? So phase two is right here. So when we hit these prices, because then we'll see a correction. So I want to take a little bit off the table. We'll very likely go higher, but it's important to just take some profits so you're not scared if there's a dip and you're not scared about round tripping all your gains. But basically, we had phase one, which is where BTC dominance climbs. And what we're going into right now is phase two, which is also called altcoin season. We'll likely see the BTC dominance start to fall as we did last cycle, right? It started going down similarly to what happened here in 2021. This is where altcoins start outperforming Bitcoin. And this is the time where most people make a lot of money. But the time where most people where the most money is going to be made is in phase three. But phase three is also risky because it's the last phase until everything starts to fall, right? You want to exit before the end of phase three or like right after it finishes. So basically, let's go back to the chart. So it'll go to phase three, and then this will be the top of the cycle, and that's when you want to get out. That's when you want to sell everything everything that you're holding short term. So some things you have long term vision for. For example, you might not sell your Bitcoin if you want to hold Bitcoin for 5-10 years. Personally, I'm not going to sell any of my Monero. That's a coin I'm extremely bullish on long term. I have a video on that one if you want to check it out. But most of my positions I will be closing at this point of the cycle because I'll be ready to accumulate them cheaply in the bear market. And I don't want my portfolio going down 80%, as is what usually happens during a correction. Like for example, you really don't want to be holding during these big corrections into a bear market because you get 95% pullbacks, 92% pullbacks. You really don't want to stick around for one of these. So I recommend you really want to know when you're selling and not be stuck in one of these kind of moves, right? So this is also when there's crazy euphoria, when everyone's in the markets, like it gets completely crazy. And as usual, when people are scared, currently now, but even more like a month ago, people were scared. It's a time to buy. People are euphoric. It's time to sell. It's very simple, basic market knowledge, right? And you want to be exiting before this move. Another indicator, right? This is basically what I just said here will get you through it. And now I'm going to add a few extra things to confirm when to sell or when to buy or when to get out of the markets. So USDT dominance is also a really good indicator. USDT is a stable coin. So when USDT dominance goes up, it means people are risk off and they're holding stable coins and they're not in the markets. When it starts to come down, people are taking more risks and people are putting their money from stable coins into risk assets, altcoins, Bitcoin, whatever. And we can see how last cycle we reached some lower levels, right? We reached like 2%, which means that almost everyone had their capital in the markets and people weren't holding stable coins, right? They were very exposed. And this means that it can't go that much lower, right? You can't really go much lower than 2% because there's very little capital left that's not in the markets, which means we probably won't go much higher price-wise, right? This is extremely important. There's not a lot of remaining capital to enter the markets. And when you see the levels start to come down to these 2% marks, it's another indicator on top of global liquidity that it's a time to get out. And you want to be pairing these together so that you have the best chance of predicting when it's a good time to get out, right? Watch for USDT dominance while the prices are high. It often signals a top, and you want to be using them all together, as I said. And then third, this ties everything together. So you want to be paying attention to the sentiment. So how can you do this? By looking at X, looking at what people are saying, looking at the comments on an X post for someone you follow, and also when people start calling outrageous targets. So I think it's pretty outrageous if Bitcoin goes to $1 million a cycle. I highly doubt that will happen. But you'll know it's the top of the cycle most likely when people start throwing around crazy targets and saying $1 million BTC this cycle. And when retail's flooding in, when everyone's getting excited, personally, I don't have an issue going away from the crowd. I can buy when everyone's scared and I can sell when people are extremely bullish and everyone's trying to get in and everyone's talking about it. For me, it doesn't matter, but I know a lot of people want to stick with the herd and do what everyone else is doing. But the markets are here for a reason. Not everyone can make money, and you always want to be doing what everyone else is not doing. So you want to be selling when sentiment gets extremely bullish, historically later stages of the cycle, right? Especially in that third stage, right over here. We'll probably start seeing it in stage two, but it won't be as crazy as in stage three. And you also, yeah, you want to be greedy when others are fearful and cautious when everyone's euphoric. So by putting all these three together, you'll have a pretty good chance at nailing the top, right? You don't want to be selling the whole thing at a top just in case. I'm taking a bit out at phase two, but you really want to be thinking of it like this, right? This makes it much clearer to visualize, and this is how it plays out because you don't want to be someone who doesn't sell at all, makes a ton of money and loses all of it, right? And then you want to be accumulating in the bear market, which will be later on, right? And I'll be making videos when it's time to sell. So, if you don't know or if you're not sure, ask me some questions and I'll try the best to help you. But overall, yeah, thanks for watching. I think with these steps in mind, you can comfortably sit back and not worry about not selling until this giant move down happens, right?